Troy, the lost city behind the legend. The city between history and legend. For more than 3,000 years, the name Troy has captured the imagination of the world. A powerful city protected by enormous walls, a beautiful queen whose disappearance sparked a war, legendary warriors like Achilles and Hector battling outside the city gates, and one of the most famous acts of deception in history, the Trojan Horse. For centuries, Troy was thought to be nothing more than a legend, a city created by the ancient Greek poet Homer for his epic poem, the Iliad. But beneath a windswept hill in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary. Troy was real, and buried beneath the earth were not the remains of just one city, but many. Cities built, destroyed, and rebuilt upon the same ground for thousands of years. So what really happened to Troy? Was there actually a Trojan War? Did warriors like Achilles and Hector truly exist? And could there be any truth behind the legendary Trojan Horse? Today we journey back more than 3,000 years to uncover the remarkable history of Troy. A city at the crossroads of the ancient world. Troy stood near the entrance to the Dardanelles, the narrow waterway connecting the Aegean Sea with the Sea of Marmara, and eventually the Black Sea. This location made Troy incredibly important. Ships traveling between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea passed through waters near the city. Merchants carried metals, pottery, textiles, grain, wine, olive oil, and other valuable goods across the ancient trade network. Troy stood at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, and whoever controlled this region occupied one of the most strategically valuable locations in the ancient world. By the late Bronze Age, around the 2nd millennium BCE, Troy had become an impressive fortified settlement. Massive stone walls surrounded its citadel. Defensive towers overlooked the surrounding plains. Inside stood houses, storage buildings, and large structures belonging to the city's elite. Beyond the fortified center, a larger settlement may have spread across the surrounding landscape. To travelers approaching from the sea, Troy would have appeared formidable and wealthy. Exactly the kind of city worth fighting for. The legend of the Trojan War. The story that made Troy immortal was written down centuries after the events it supposedly describes. According to Greek mythology, the conflict began with Paris, a prince of Troy. Paris traveled to Sparta, where he encountered Helen, wife of King Menelaus. In the legendary account, Helen left Sparta with Paris and traveled to Troy. Whether she was abducted or went willingly depends on the version of the story. But to the Greeks, the result was the same: war. Menelaus called upon his brother, the powerful king Agamemnon of Mycenae. A massive coalition of Greek kingdoms assembled. Thousands of warriors sailed across the Aegean toward Troy. Among them were some of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology: Odysseus, Ajax, Agamemnon, and the nearly unstoppable warrior Achilles. Waiting behind Troy's walls was Prince Hector, Troy's greatest defender. According to the legend, the Greeks surrounded the city and began a siege that would last 10 years. Achilles and Hector. At the heart of Homer's Iliad is not the entire Trojan War. Instead, the poem focuses on a short and devastating period near its end. Its central figure is Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks. After a bitter dispute with Agamemnon, Achilles refuses to fight. Without him, the Trojans begin pushing the Greek armies back towards their ships. Then tragedy changes everything. Achilles' close companion, Patroclus, enters battle wearing Achilles' armor. Hector kills him. Enraged by grief, Achilles returns to the battlefield. Outside the walls of Troy, Achilles confronts Hector. The two warriors fight, and Hector is killed. For the Trojans, the loss is devastating. Their greatest warrior is gone, but Troy itself still stands. Its massive walls remain unbroken, And according to the legend, defeating the city would require something far more powerful than brute force. It would require deception. The Trojan Horse. After years of unsuccessful warfare, the Greeks devised a final plan. They constructed an enormous wooden horse. A group of Greek warriors hid inside it while the rest of the army appeared to abandon the siege. Their ships sailed away from the beaches. The Trojans emerged from behind their walls. After years of war, their enemy appeared to be gone. The enormous wooden horse remained behind. Believing it to be an offering, the Trojans brought the horse inside their city. That night, while Troy slept, the Greek warriors climbed out. They opened the city gates. The Greek army, having secretly returned under the cover of darkness, poured into Troy. The city was burned, its defenders were killed, and the legendary Trojan War came to an end. It is one of history's most famous stories, but there is a problem. Homer's Iliad does not actually tell the story of the Trojan Horse. The episode comes from other ancient traditions and later works, including the Odyssey, and centuries afterward, Virgil's Aeneid. So did the horse really exist? There is no archaeological evidence that it did. Some historians have suggested it could symbolize a siege engine. Others believe it may preserve a distorted memory of an earthquake, since horses were associated with the god Poseidon, who was also linked to earthquakes. And perhaps the simplest explanation is that the horse was a brilliant piece of ancient storytelling. For now, the truth remains unknown. Was Troy actually real? For centuries, many scholars doubted that Troy had ever existed. Then, during the 19th century, an ambitious businessman and amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann became convinced that Homer's stories contained real geographical clues. He traveled to northwestern Turkey. There, at a mound called Hisarlık, excavations revealed the remains of an ancient city. But Schliemann quickly discovered something unexpected. There wasn't just one Troy, there were multiple Troys. Over thousands of years, settlements had repeatedly been built on top of earlier settlements. When one city was destroyed, another rose above it. Archaeologists today divide these layers into different phases, traditionally known as Troy 1, Troy 2, Troy 3, and onward. Schliemann initially believed that a rich early layer he uncovered belonged to Homer's Troy. He even discovered a spectacular collection of gold objects that he dramatically called Priam's treasure. But there was a major problem. The objects were roughly 1,000 years too old to belong to the traditional period of the Trojan War. Schliemann had found Troy, but he had identified the wrong Troy, the Troy of the Trojan War. Later, archaeology focused attention on layers known as Troy 6 and Troy 7a. These settlements existed during the Late Bronze Age, the period most commonly associated with a possible historical Trojan War. Troy 6 possessed impressive defensive walls constructed from enormous blocks of stone. Parts of these fortifications still survive today. Around 1300 BCE, Troy 6 was destroyed. An earthquake may have been responsible. The city was rebuilt. The following settlement, Troy 7a, shows intriguing signs of stress. Buildings were packed closely together. Large storage vessels were buried beneath floors. Then, sometime around the late 13th or early 12th century BCE, the settlement was violently destroyed. Evidence of burning has been discovered. Archaeologists have also found weapons and human remains. None of this proves that Homer's Trojan War happened exactly as described, but it demonstrates something remarkable. A fortified city really did exist at Troy during approximately the right period, and that city really was destroyed. Evidence from the Hittites. Another clue comes not from Greece, but from the Hittite Empire. The Hittites controlled much of Anatolia during the Late Bronze Age and left behind thousands of clay tablets. Some of these documents mention a kingdom called Volusa. Many scholars believe Volusa may have been Troy. The similarity is particularly intriguing because the Greek name for Troy in Homer's poetry includes Ilios. The tablets also describe conflicts involving a Western power called Ahiyawa. Many historians associate Ahiyawa with the Achaeans, one of Homer's names for the Greeks. If these identifications are correct, the documents suggest that powerful Greek-speaking kingdoms were involved in political and military struggles in Western Anatolia. Not necessarily one enormous 10-year war over Helen of Troy, but perhaps a series of conflicts that eventually became the foundation for the legend. Over generations, memories of real battles may have transformed into epic poetry. Kings became heroes. Soldiers became legendary warriors. A destroyed Bronze Age city became the stage for one of humanity's greatest stories, the fall of the Bronze Age world. Troy's destruction occurred during one of the most turbulent periods in ancient history. Around 1200 BCE, civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean began collapsing. Mycenaean palaces were destroyed. The Hittite Empire disappeared. Trade networks collapsed. Cities burned. Egypt struggled against invading groups remembered today as the Sea Peoples. Historians still debate exactly what caused this Bronze Age collapse. War? Famine? Earthquakes? Political instability? Climate change? Migration? Perhaps all of them played a role. Troy was caught in the middle of this changing world. Yet unlike many cities that disappeared forever, Troy would rise again. The immortality of Troy. Thousands of years later, visitors can still walk among the ruins of Troy. They can stand beside the remains of its ancient defensive walls. Look across the plains where Greek and Trojan armies supposedly fought, and imagine the city that once stood here. We may never know whether Achilles fought Hector, whether Helen watched the war from Troy's walls, or whether Greek soldiers truly emerged from a wooden horse in the darkness. But archaeology has revealed something perhaps even more fascinating. Behind the legend, there was a real city, a wealthy settlement occupying one of the ancient world's most important crossroads, a city that suffered destruction during the turbulent final centuries of the Bronze Age. Perhaps the Trojan War was not a single conflict. Perhaps it was the distant memory of many wars, compressed over centuries into one extraordinary story. History became a legend, legend became poetry, and poetry made Troy immortal. More than 3,000 years after the city burned, we are still telling its stories. Thank you for joining us on another expedition through the ancient world. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to Ancient Atlas Expeditions as we uncover lost cities, forgotten civilizations, ancient temples, and the greatest mysteries of history. Until next time, keep exploring.